Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's discussion. We're talking about performance inclusion in Sri Lanka, performing inclusion in Sri Lanka with disability and the arts. It is the International Day of Persons with Disability. And the British Council, together with Visibility, has been doing quite a lot of amazing things in Sri Lanka to create an environment of inclusion and empowerment for persons with disabilities using the power of dance. And to introduce to you a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, I'd like to invite the country director of the British Council, Myra Rahman, to give you a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome on behalf of the British Council. Today, the 3rd of December, marks the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and as many of you will already know, the theme this year is Building Back Better, towards a disability-inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID world. People with disabilities are disproportionately affected by the health, social, and economic consequences of the global COVID-19 pandemic. In this context, this year's theme emphasizes the importance of strengthening our collective efforts for universal access to essential services, including immediate health and social protection, education, access to employment, and other socio-cultural opportunities, in order to ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind in times of crisis and beyond. Because even under normal circumstances, persons with disabilities are less likely to access healthcare, education, employment, and to participate in the community. Disability inclusion will result in a COVID-19 response and recovery that better serves everyone. The panel discussion tonight is part of the British Council's wider goal to recognize and help to dismantle barriers that persons with disabilities face in our policies, program design, and working practices, as well as our attitudes and behaviors. And on that note, not to give too much away before the discussion, just let me say that this project is run jointly by Visibility for Delivery and the Universities of Essex and Coventry for research on impact, and follows an earlier 3-year study by the respective institutions. The project aims to use the arts, in this case dance, to promote inclusive development for people with disabilities by challenging and changing community perceptions through mixed-abled dance workshops and disability rights workshops. This work is also an example of how projects have had to pivot online during the pandemic to continue to reach people and to affect change. We hope the discussion will provide insight on how dance and disability rights awareness have empowered persons with disabilities through recent projects developed by the panel members and co-funded by the British Council's grant. So many thanks to our panelists for taking the time to join this discussion. And without further ado, I'll hand you back to Shanuki. I hope you enjoy this discussion and find it both enlightening and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myra. And as she introduced me, my name is Shanuki, and I will be the moderator for this evening's panel discussion. Just a few housekeeping rules before I introduce you to the panelists, to the presenters of the evening. This session will go on for 1 hour and 15 minutes. We will hear from the amazing speakers we have lined up for you. And after that, you are free to send us any questions you like. You will be watching this on Facebook or whatever screen you're watching it on. Please do feel free to send us questions in the comment section, and we will try our best to answer them for you. And over to letting you know who the panel is. Today we have with us people, not only experts in the areas of disability and inclusion, but people who have actually given a lot of their time and effort and expertise towards creating something amazing in Sri Lanka, to create an empowering situation and environment to empower persons with disabilities in Sri Lanka. So that contribution has been immense, and I'm so privileged to have them here on this panel. I'd like to introduce them to you one by one. First of all, we have Professor Lars Waldorf. And Lars Waldorf, he's a professor at the Essex Law School. He has worked primarily on transitional justice and peace building in Rwanda and in Sri Lanka. He was the principal investigator for a GCRF grant that's from 2016 to 2018, and a British Council grant in 2018 to 19 on dance and legal empowerment in post-war Sri Lanka. So I welcome Professor Lars Waldorf to the panel.
Great to be here, thanks.
And next we have Dr. Hettie Blatz. She's an assistant professor in the Center for Dance Research, also known as CDARE, at the Coventry University. She has worked on a number of research projects examining the intersections of dance and disability. She was a co-investigator on performing empowerment in collaboration with Professor Lars Waldorf and Visibility, funded by AHRC. Welcome, Dr. Hetty Blades.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Vipavinee Artpradid, and she's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Dance Research, Coventry University. She recently completed her PhD research titled Dance, Disability, and the Pluralistic Audience, a Phenomenographic Engagement, and has an MA in Anthropology of Media from the School of Oriental and African Studies from SOAS in the UK. Her research interests include applied educational and social research, performance studies, audience engagement research, anthropology of dance and movement, and media, cultural, and sociological theory. Next, we have a Sri Lankan, Mahesh Umagiliya. Mahesh is a Sri Lankan dancer and a choreographer. He delivers Visibility's mixed-able dance workshops in collaboration with Gerda König and Visibility's dance assistants. He also acts as Visibility's country representative. In addition to his responsibilities, he runs his own dance company, Meranga Fine Arts Ensemble, and he has worked on a number of national and international dance projects in Germany and the US, including mixed-able projects. In 2017, he received the Banka Award for his artistic achievement by the Japanese Sri Lankan Friendship Cultural Fund. Thank you for being with us, Mahesh. We also have Dr. Helena Marambio. And Dr. Marambio is a social legal scholar with expertise in disability rights. She is the co-founder of Visibility and acts as its research coordinator. As a part of her role, she conducts Visibility's rights awareness workshops. She has recently completed a PhD in law from the University of Essex in the UK on the potential of legal empowerment for Tamil women with physical disabilities. Currently, she holds the position of postdoctoral research associate at the University of Lincoln, UK, investigating arts-based approaches for peace building.
Good evening.
Good evening. And finally, unfortunately, there was one more person who was supposed to be on this panel, but we've had a few technical difficulties and she's very sadly unable to join us. But I would love to introduce her to you anyway to let you know who she is. And that is Gerda König. Gerda König is a German mixed-able dance choreographer. She is the co-founder of Visibility. Since 2014, she runs Visibility's mixed-able dance workshops with Mahesh in different communities. She is also the artistic director of Din A13 Dance Company, one of the leading mixed-able dance ensembles on international levels, and has worked on a number of international projects in Africa, South America, and Asia. She has won several awards by the German Cultural Ministry and federal government. It would have been lovely to have her here, but unfortunately, because she's not able to join us, Mahesh will step into her place and answer whatever questions we have lined up for her. All right. Thank you to the panelists once more, and I'm looking forward to having a great discussion. Dance is such an important thing. I think music in itself, rhythm is such an important thing to Sri Lanka. I think we all have this pulsating rhythm within us, and it does so much. The performing arts does so much to really bring people out of so many challenges. So I'd like to start off by asking Helena the first question. Dr. Helena, what is the situation for people with disabilities in Sri Lanka that Visibilities work is addressing?
Many thanks for the kind introduction, Shanuki. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the British Council for organizing this event. We are really honored. Let me describe Visibilities work at first before I answer your question. Just let me try, sorry. Can picture one? Visibility is a German non-profit association working for the empowerment for people with disabilities in Sri Lanka, and it was set up by people with and without disabilities with the aim to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. Our team members come from Germany, Sri Lanka, and India. Since 2015, we have executed different projects with both people with and without disabilities in the country. Over the last 3 years, we were focusing on the north and east of the island. However, due to the current situation, we are also conducting online training for people with and without disabilities around Colombo since the beginning of October this year, with the kind support of the British Council. Picture 2. Our projects usually seek to bring together people with and without disabilities to foster dialogue, reduce stereotypes, and to encourage future mutual support and understanding among the peers once the project have ended. We believe that change can only happen if both groups come together and approach each other through group discussions, but also nonverbal means like the arts. According to our experiences, it is usually easier to use the arts, or in our case, dance, to create a space for dialogue, to create a safe space, and create a space where people can actually communicate without using words, which is in some cases actually more difficult than people may think. We have also observed that the arts are usually helping to break invisible boundaries based on misconceptions of disability, stigma, and fear. Visibility is using a combined tool of dance and rights education in each of its 4 to 5 day workshops in Sri Lanka. Our methodology has been developed over the past years based on local dance forms, our experiences and feedback from participants in the workshops, our academic partners, to whom you will listen later, and other artists and organizations involved in our projects. My colleague Mahesh Umagiliya will talk about it a little more later. Our workshops are usually switching between dance and rights sessions, but they are also often relying on each other. At the end of each workshop, like after 4 or 5 days, we are organizing a public dance performance with our participants in each village or in crowded places in town, like the market in Anuradhapura or Batiklo. Picture 4, please. The combined tool of dance and rights education seeks to build self-confidence and self-esteem for social interactions, particularly for people with disabilities, to create awareness about the value of a diverse society among non-disabled people, and also to create awareness how they contribute to stereotypes and exclusion, and to inform both people with and without disabilities about equal rights, rights that concern people with disabilities, the laws and rights in general, and bureaucratic and legal procedures. The reasons why we opted for dance and rights education is the following. During our pilot project in 2015, when we traveled throughout the country for 3 to 4 months, we had several encounters with people with and without disabilities, lawyers, parents, caretakers, who were expressing the following. People with disabilities, often, especially those who were born with the disabilities or became disabled due to an accident or to war, showed low showed low levels of self-esteem and self-confidence. In most cases, they felt rejected. Some of them were also hidden in the houses by family members. In some cases, but also in some cases, people opted to stay in the house because they felt ashamed to go outside. Many of them had also experienced one or more forms of rejections by community members, harsh behavior by social welfare officers, police officers, or any people that they try to approach in case of need. Several of them, and that was one of the main issues, also pointed to the fact that they lacked access to information. Access to information was also related to the lack of knowledge. How can you ask the right question if you don't know about a certain aspect? You simply don't know. Most people with disabilities were also not aware about their rights and the laws. In some cases, they were simply pointing to the fact that they were entitled to use one seat on the bus. In other cases, people with disabilities experience domestic violence, especially women. Women with physical disabilities also not complained, but expressed the need for maintenance and didn't know where to seek help, how to seek help, and when they would actually get help. In other cases, people with disabilities, adults, experienced problems at school. They were pushed out of school and often did not know why, or their parents did not know whom they could approach. In some cases, there was a hostile environment, so that even if one teacher or two teachers wanted to support the disabled person, there was no support offered by the school. In several cases, people with disabilities also expressed fear or insecurity when they spoke about approaching a lawyer. They expressed their low level through words through words and the way how they expressed themselves in the interviews. It became clear that they felt insecure to approach a lawyer. They felt insecure because they had lower levels of education. And most of the time, they also lack financial means to use transport system to approach a lawyer in town. The Legal Aid Commission is most of the time next to the courts. And especially for those who are living in rural areas, a trip can cost up to 5,000 rupees. And this is something that a person without work in a rural area is not able to afford. Many of them also struggled concerning the social welfare system. Based on the lack of information, they did not know that these kind of benefits exist. But then due to the under-resourced situation in Sri Lanka, many of them were waiting for their application replies. Many of them also didn't know what happened to the application status. And many of them also didn't know how to obtain any information regarding the application status. Many of them also indicated that they had problems to approach the officer, again, based on financial problems, but then also based on the situation in the villages. In some cases, people expressed problems with the village officer. These are only some problems that we encounter throughout the country and that we are trying to approach invisibility through dance and rights awareness. And by bringing people without disabilities on board, we hope to create awareness about their role in this environment as well. We hope by our workshops usually try to bridge the gap between people with and without disabilities. And most of the time, as we may hear later on, people started to help each other. People started to help mutually after the workshops. They accompanied each other or they helped out on a daily basis. In this regard, visibility is not only an empowering environment, or doesn't not only create an empowering environment for the workshops, but we are trying to create change on the ground that is sustainable. However, as we know, change needs time. So we really hope that we can come back after this COVID situation and continue our work with the communities in the country. Thank Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helena Marambio, for that. There's quite a lot of detail in there about the struggles or the challenges that persons of disability in Sri Lanka have faced, and it's really it's something that we can all work towards supporting. The access to facility and really this new lease of life that we can offer them through the performing arts, where they can feel more empowered to express themselves. I would like to actually, we have Gerda König here with us, but unfortunately we have some technical issues. So there's a bit of a issue with her video and her audio, although she is with us on this panel. This next question was to her, but in the event that we cannot have her on screen, I would love it if Mahesh could please just pitch in. I'd really like to know, what is mixed able dance and what is that exactly? And if we could give it a little introduction.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the question. And when you hear mixed able dance, I think it's probably a new word for local audience. And even it is like 25 years ago in Europe also there were no mixed able activities. So it was new to the Europe also 25 years ago. But as I heard from Gerda that they started somehow in Europe, the mixed able dance. That means Gerda was creating her own dance company with people with and without disabilities, doing dance together and talking about the society and the issues of the society about people with disabilities in a way that using art as a tool. So if we think about the situation of Sri Lanka, you know that like we had this 30 years, I think more than 30 years of war in Sri Lanka, and during that time, like when I was growing also, I have never seen many people with disabilities in the street. Usually when we go out, we don't see many wheelchairs or people with disabilities. And even though we see some people with disabilities, we see them like beggars or doing like labor work or something like that. So there were no, in Sri Lanka, there were no recognition for people with disabilities. But this mixed table dance, especially introducing the this dance. Usually, dance is a language. In dance, you don't need words to talk and convey your message or your feeling or your expressions to the audience. So you can express yourself through the movements. So so then the dance is when you start doing mixed table dance, that means you can learn from each other. Like you can learn from people with disabilities, and people with disabilities can learn from people without disabilities, and they can come together with the language of dance, and they can understand the diversity and the beauty of diversity. So if I can explain it like this, like in our societies, we know that if you say you're a dancer, people expect that dancer should have a dancer figure and beautiful skinny body, kind of like they have their own cultural measures to see a dancer. But then when you tell that you are a person with disabilities but you are still a dancer, it is kind of a question in the society. that how can you dance? But in this mixed table dance, we see the special qualities of the people with different physicalities. We use those special qualities of people with disabilities in artistic way on stage or in performances. So there we see, like, we understand the diversity and the beauty of this diverse movement. So I think mostly, like, mixed table dance is something like seeing the beauty. So in my point of view, I think for me the dance and the art is seeing the beauty of imperfection in a positive way. So the mixed table dance is something we can all come together without thinking about our physicality, without thinking about our abilities, uh, and it is giving you the awareness of the the the, the potential of each person's ability, and also giving the awareness of the body of the other person. So usually we think about ourselves as dancers and how do I look on stage kind of attitude we have. But in when you dance with mixed table dance, you have you have a chance to see the beauty of the other person's body, and you have a chance to experience the potential of each person in their individual way. So this is how I think I can describe mixed table dance.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to describe it. It's really like in any situation where you feel that you are unheard or unseen, here is a common language that you can share with everyone who is doing it with you, and that's really wonderful. Mahesh, can you tell me? Can you give me some examples of how visibility actually works with participants in your dance workshops and as well as your performances?
Yeah, I can tell you like a simple example and a simple process how we work from beginning to end. So usually, you know, like most Sri Lankans know that in our society, usually the society is not accepting the word if you say no to somebody. They think that it's not polite to say no, even though you can't do it or not, you have to accept it and say yes, or like things like that. And also
Right.
we cannot question our parents and teachers, and we can't say no to them. Even though we don't like what is happening to us, we say yes, and we take it and we just live with it. So it's a cultural problem all
Yeah.
of us faced in this society. So we think if I say no, other person will get angry with me, or he will think I'm not polite. But this attitude is putting us always in very big troubles in our lives. So but in if you think in Europe, people are used to say no to something if you don't like. So in visibility, we do a simple task. We call it a yes and no task. We put the entire group in one side of the room, and we put a leader in front of the group, and we tell the leader to step forward and say yes, and then we tell the rest of the group to step backward when the leader is stepping forward. And then after the yes, we tell the group to step forward and say no together as a group. So we tell them to play with it. As an example, if the leader said yes, the group says no in the same matching
In the
way.
way.
But the group, as a group, the voice is more powerful, but they don't overpower. Like if the leader said yes, they don't say no. It's giving you like the conflict in between you if you don't agree with the expression. But the group is saying no in the same way, they say no. But if the leader said yes, yes. Group will say, no, no, following the same expression. But as a group, they are so powerful together, and the leader is alone. So then people eventually learn to practice. I mean, they practice to say no. If you don't like something, you say no in your own way, and also the way that there's no conflicts. Conflict can be triggered in the way you say no. And also you see the ability as a group, when you say no, it's very powerful. And then after this exercise, people get this understanding: you have an ability to say no, and you have an ability to say what you like or not. And then we go to the next extension of this task. We give them to find something you like most in the society that people tell you, or people give towards you, like an attitude or a word or something. And then people come with each like sentence. I like when people say that my smile is so beautiful. I like when people say I'm so intelligent, kind of answers they are coming up with. Then we tell them to find a key word from that sentence and express that word with a movement in a way that how you feel to express. As an example, they say like beautiful with an expression, or they say like intelligent, kind of with
Right.
a movement. So we do that game for a while and we play with it, and then we go step slowly into the critical area, that the non-safe area. We slowly ask them, what do you don't like when people tell you? So then they come up with like, I don't like when they tell me a limpy woman. I don't like when they tell me an idiot. And I don't like when they tell me that you can't do anything, you are disabled. So then we tell them, okay, find a keyword and try to express yourself with a movement with that word. So they come up with different energetic movements, and they express. We encourage them to say it loud also, like throwing it out, throw their anger away kind of attitude. So then what happen is like we do this because that in Sri Lankan traditional dance also, you see in especially the low country dance tradition, you see like people were treated in these healing rituals when people got feared for something. So they have like they got scared for something, and they have fear, and they they are ill with their mentality. And then the ritual performers are coming to you and they tell you that you have a demon, and then they come with a demon costume, and they say that they pull your inner demon out.
Yeah, these are
And
the
then they,
toiles.
yeah, in toilet kind of like rituals. So
Yeah.
then the ritual performers ritual performers start talking to this demon and criticizing this demon in sarcastic way, and putting him in like very humorous jokes, and making him in this demonic state to a joker or a loser kind of state. And then the ritual performer simply play the drum and chase the demon away. So it is giving them in the ill person's mentality, okay, my inner fear came out as a demon, and now it has turned into something you should not be afraid, and it was chased away. We do the same thing with this particular task because early time people had fear because they didn't know what is going on with the nature, because they never had explanations, scientific explanations for the surrounding. But nowadays when you see the society, people don't have much fears, but they have much anger in their inside. Anger is the biggest demon in modern society. So we decided to treat in the same way they treated to the fear, to the anger also we took the same approach. So we give them a chance to pull their anger out with a movement, with the way that they can express their anger and shout, and they shout with the words they are not like that the society is calling them. But then what we did was we put them in a group and we got these nice movement, energetic movements, and we usually create a nice dance piece, energetic dance piece with all those movements in a choreographic structure. And then we give them a chance to perform it in front of a broad audience, like a flash mob. And then what happened is they perform it, they put their all energy, they pull their anger out and they shout it loud. And then when they come after the performance, they come to the workshop next day. We ask, how do you feel today? They say that I feel so relaxed. I don't feel angry anymore with the society because I got a chance to express myself and I pulled the anger out. So the same way of healing in the ancient rituals happening in this context also in the same way. So they are the place that the healing start. And then what we do in the next workshops, now they are like an empty ground. We could plant the seeds of love and seeds of potential, seeds of encouragement. And then from next day, they start thinking about their self and stepping forward with their life in a positive manner because they left their anger away. So this is how visibility work in the society.
Okay, thank you. And I can see how that's really cathartic. It's almost like mental health, well-being and healing, and it's such a detoxing thing. I come from the performing arts background, so I know how cathartic and how much of an escape it is for somebody who's going through something to be able to get it all out, and to be able to express yourself. Like you said, whether it's taking out your emotions in the form of dance, in the form of sound, in the form of movement. It's incredible how that language of performance, that language of dance can really make such a difference in your own well-being, in your spiritual, in your soul. We have some very interesting questions that have been posed by viewers out there. And in the interest of time, I don't think we can go through all the questions because we do have other speakers coming up as well. But I would like to pose one interesting one that I picked up. And this I'd like to put it to Helena, actually. Is this a good... is mixed table dance a way that can help children with disabilities?
That is actually also a good question to Mahesh. Yes,
well, Mahesh and Helena both.
I think it is a good tool because, again, children also need to be educated about what is right and what is wrong, how to behave in case of abuse, for example, how to behave in case of violence, where to go to, how to express themselves, etc. But then, on the other hand, children who have experienced these kind of issues, they may not necessarily be able to express themselves because it is one of the family members who is approaching them. So through the workshops, there is coming like Mahesh, coming from the performing arts, there is this possibility to express yourself through embodied language. And I guess at the same time, while we are kind of like releasing this pain and the feelings, children and also adults learn much faster and better when we are combining rights education with dance. If they are only simply listening in a lecture, it's going in and it's going out and nothing will stay in their heads. But when we are dancing and when we are also simplifying the language and the complexity of the law and bureaucratic system, we have seen that even children picked up some information, but especially adults were able to learn and to start trying to solve the situation later on.
Right.
In terms of children with mental disabilities, I guess, Mahesh, maybe you can say something about that very briefly.
I think like
Actually,
dance is
sorry.
giving them an encouragement, and it is giving them a value also to show their abilities, and it is making them visible in front of the broader audience or in front of people. So this attention given to them is really helpful to come out of their shells. So dance is a very good tool to do that also.
Right. Actually, there's a second part to the question. Can we incorporate this into special education schools and units?
Mahesh, do
Yes,
you
I
want to
think
try?
because we worked with the Nuffield school in Jaffna, and we saw very good results because there were some children that school teachers were refusing to take into their classes. They wanted that kid to like throw out of the school also at one point, but they came to our workshop, and then after that workshop happened in the school holidays, and after the school holidays teachers came, and they were surprised to see this child, how he has changed from that nasty child to a very good well behaving loving and caring person. So I think we know if you should include this kind of work into school, because the kids are the future of our society. So they are going to lead the society one day. So it is, I think, best place is the school to start incorporating this mixed table activities.
Right. And just one more question, which I thought was interesting in your project. Have you explored how certain terms in local languages are used to reiterate negative connotations of persons living with disabilities? As you said, like throwing out the anger, you use the local idioms or the local terminology or the words that they don't like. How commonly used words might become a barrier to achieving performance inclusion? That question I thought was quite interesting. How these local languages, how they reiterate the negative connotations, and how those words can actually be a barrier to inclusion rather than uh, you know creating inclusion.
Yeah, I think we we have, like, in our society people say different names to people with disabilities, usually like way of they say or address them. We have I will explain this with my experience. In one region we had a girl. That girl was limping, but then some group of boys used to call her a limpy woman. So this lady, she didn't like to come out of her house and go on this road that those boys are making these names towards her. But then in visibility, we took her limp as a tool, like a movement to the choreography. We incorporate that limp, and we all the dancers adapt her limp in a beautiful way, and we had a nice dance parade in this road. And then after watching this dance, all the people started seeing the beauty of her limp, and beyond that point they stopped calling her limpy woman. But the interesting thing that happened was that the lady said she doesn't mind that she's being called limpy woman anymore. So both side was kind of coming to a compromisation, that she accepts that she's limping, and she doesn't care that calling limpy woman. But then the society stopped calling her limpy woman, but they say, because they saw the beauty of her limp.
Okay. What kind of changes have you seen in your participants after the end of your project, which you might not have mentioned so far?
Helena, are you going
Yeah,
to?
so I guess in the interviews there were several things coming out. I mean, there was change, gradual change during the workshops from one day to another. So it's actually hard to tell when change started, because each person is very different, and also each person comes from a different background, has a different story, etc. But in the interviews, it became very clear that people had gained levels of self-esteem and self-confidence, and that people also started to initiate the process with, for example, with the social welfare office or with legal aid commission, even during the workshop sessions. Means that they went to these particular places right after the workshop or very early in the morning when they could. I guess one of the most surprising situation that we had during our pilot project, when we were running 4 workshops in Anudadapura, Polonaruva, Batiklor, and in Ampara, was that we had a lady who was coming with a stick, and she was telling us for 5 days that she could not walk. And we kept on telling her, Marsha Gerda kept on telling her, at least try. And this lady went home forgetting her stick in the workshop place. And I guess this has something to do, that people sometimes need an encouragement and support, positive words, a positive environment, a space and time. And most of the time, we as people, like physically able people, we don't have enough patience. We want everything to be done very fast.
Yeah.
And also thinking about how a person grew up. Sometimes people, like right from the start as a child, like these people are told you cannot do this, you cannot do that because you are disabled. So they stop trying out. And I guess these workshops give them a space to kind of reconnect with themselves, reconnect with their minds, reconnect with their souls, reconnect with their bodies. And this is something that is really hard to describe. But I guess that is the beauty of mixed able dance, but also the combination of rights and dance education, because people can get practical advice in the workshop. It's not simply about dance. It's something that they can use in life, maybe not immediately after the workshops, but maybe at some point in life.
Okay. Thank you. Right, just one last question for Mahesh very quickly before I bring in Professor Lars and the rest of them. I'm sure they're waiting because I've got some questions for them as well. But Visibility is currently conducting an online training with this COVID situation and all that. Obviously, it's much more challenging to have things on ground, but you have an online training for people with and without disabilities in Sri Lanka. Could you share very quickly some of the experiences or lessons that you have learned about moving, physical dance and rights workshops into a digital space, into an online space?
Yeah,
has that been challenging?
Yeah, it's a big challenge because we are dancers. As a dancer, I used to deal with real people, touching them and addressing them and looking at them from different perspectives in the dance studio and advising them or having fun with them. And in this digital platform, we see them through a frame. So it's limiting us to get to know each other very well and to see their physicality and guide them also. But I see negative and positive points also. Even though we cannot go to them and be so close to them, we got a chance to meet them without leaving them alone for a long time. Just we got a chance to see them, talk to them, and even exchange our experiences and emotions. And it's a very good place that we all come together and we talk about everything, and also exploring the way how we can move our bodies, how we can use the dance language, even we are stick in little rooms with a lot of people also, how we can incorporate this mini world full with dance and experiencing it in different way. So now currently this project is happening, and we see beautiful creations from them with simple tasks, and they are very easily, they have adapt to the situation, and I think hopefully in the future you will see a beautiful dance performance with them. This is first time in my life also I'm doing something like this.
And I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. I look forward to seeing what comes out of that. I'd like to bring in Professor Lars Waldorf now. I'd like to direct a question to him. Lars, can you explain to us what makes the Visibility Project interesting for researchers in the UK?
Let me say, great, thanks very much for the question. Let me say there are a couple of things. One is that UK research funding bodies are increasingly interested in promoting inclusive and sustainable development along the lines of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you have, for example, the Global Challenges Research Fund that was used to fund some of the earlier research we were doing with disability. The other thing is that the UK funding agencies have become much more interested in interdisciplinary and especially arts-based practice and research, and using visual and embodied methodologies. So let me say a couple of things as well about why this particular project, this Disabilities project, was interesting to me when Helena first told me about it at a completely unrelated conference. The first is that there are a bunch of mixed-able dance projects already out there. There are a bunch of rights awareness projects out there already for people with disabilities, but nobody, as far as I know, has thought about bringing the two of them together. And that's what Visibility did, and that's what it did differently. So I think there are really three ways to kind of think about, or three lenses for looking at disabilities research work from a research perspective. The first way is to think about it as a form of what's called transformative human rights education. So typically human rights education is a bit boring, frankly. It's about telling people what the laws are, what the rights are, learning about international treaties like the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. All very important, but a little dry and legalistic. And transformative human rights education is about making things more experiential, making things much more playful, and much more bottom-up, and focusing on actual lived experience. And that's something that Visibility is doing very much in its community work with dance workshops. A second way to think about the work that Visibility is doing is through the lens of human development and particularly legal empowerment. So the idea of legal empowerment is people are learning to use the law, how to use the law to demand their rights, services, social welfare from the government, and thereby improving their livelihood. Now, legal empowerment to date hasn't paid a whole lot of attention to people with disabilities, hasn't paid a whole lot of attention to psychosocial empowerment and somatic empowerment, bodily empowerment, and how that impacts on the ability to then claim your rights and claim for services. And so again, this is something that Visibility saw and was doing in practice. And so that made it really exciting to me as somebody who had been working on legal empowerment for a couple of years, but I hadn't seen anybody else doing anything like that. Final thing to say is, and this is something Mahesh brought up when he was talking, was that obviously Sri Lanka went through a terrible civil war, 28, 30-year civil war. And as a result, many people were wounded and became disabled. They were impaired as a result of the war, and then sometimes they're disabled as a result of the peace that they have because of all the barriers, both social and environmental barriers that they face. Both the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission in Sri Lanka and the consultation task force on reconciliation both talked about the need to pay more attention to people who have been disabled as a result of war. And again, that's something that I saw Visibility doing in its work, both in the North and in the South. And again, disability is something that's cross-cutting. We know that there are lots of divisions in Sri Lanka, divisions that helped lead to the war and that have remained since the war, divisions on the basis of language, ethnicity, religion, but disability cuts across those divisions, and that's very important, something to work with. The final thing I want to say is maybe just to pick up something from one of the questions. One of the questions was asking about whether the Sri Lankan government has done enough for people with disabilities, and the answer is sadly no. The Sri Lankan government did ratify the Convention for Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2016. That was great, that was a big step, but they haven't done the implementing domestic legislation to make that a reality for people. And that there's still a tendency for government officials and government ministries to take sort of a medical model approach to disability, to treat people with disability as people with problems and who are deserving of charity, rather than understanding that their disability is partly caused by social barriers and that we need to remove those social barriers, and also understanding that people with disabilities have rights. They don't just have needs, and they're not just deserving of charity, they're deserving of having their rights supported as with other non-disabled people. So let me leave it there and turn it over to Alwis. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Over to Dr. Hetty Blades now, and I'd like to ask you, Hetty, can you tell us what are some of your findings about the effect of visibilities workshops and their performances? What kind of effects have those had on people with disabilities?
Sure, thank you, Shanuki. So in our first collaboration with Visibility, which was this Performing Impairment project that's already been mentioned, our main focus as researchers was really on this question of what is the impact of these workshops on disabilities who take part, and what if they gain from the experience. So in that project, Visibility ran two kind of round workshops. They ran workshops at Jaffna in the summer of 2017, and then returned to Jaffna and Jaffna in December 2017, January 2018. So there was a 6-month gap between these two kind of round workshops, which was interesting for us researchers because we were able to interview people, 6 months after they were first apart, remain with them. So we focused in this project on a very small sample of people with physical disabilities. We interviewed people before, during and after each round work. So we used observation, so we very closely observed how people were behaving and moving in the workshops. And I'll just outline the areas that we noticed in terms of change. So the first is physical confidence, and this was really demonstrated.
Hetty, I'm sorry to just butt in there a little bit. It's a little soft. I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. I think at certain points the audio does pick up, so I'm just wondering if you could be a little louder.
Sure. Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, I'll get a bit closer.
So sorry about that.
No, it's fine. So we noticed people were growing in physical confidence over the course of the workshops, and we identified that people were beginning to move quite differently. So while people often appeared kind of a bit hesitant at first with the movement tasks, over time their movements became much more experimental. They were using much bigger movements, being much more comfortable being off balance or giving their weight to other people. Also, participants began to speak up more in workshops. So while at the beginning people were often a bit kind of hesitant to contribute to group discussions, over time they became much more comfortable sharing their experiences of the past, asking questions, giving creative ideas to visibility. And we noticed with this that there was also some kind of overlap in that participants then told us in interviews that they were feeling much more confident socially. They're also much more comfortable speaking in different kind of social environments. And there was some kind of spillover from the experiences of the workshops into their daily lives.
Okay.
We also noticed much more comfortable leading, and so in the second round of workshops, some of the participants had taken part in the first round of workshops, and they were joined by some new participants. And what we really noticed in the second round of workshops is that some of the original participants were voluntarily leading small groups, teaching their peers different exercises, and kind of taking leadership roles voluntarily. And they were also encouraged by Visibility to help support the delivery of the workshop, so to keep the new participants exercise. Other things that were reported in our interviews include physical changes, such as people saying they had more energy from being involved in the workshops. They felt more flexible in their bodies, they had less pain. Another common theme was that people really enjoyed the chance to be away from their daily lives and engage in something that removed them from the kind of stresses and strains of daily life. And then to talk a bit, just very briefly, about the impact on legal empowerment, which Lars already mentioned and Hetty a bit about, but we did discover through our research that most of the participants were able to apply the rights-based knowledge that they'd learned in the workshops and had developed the confidence and self-esteem to advocate for themselves in a different way to before. So they reported feeling more confident in terms of engaging with institutions, applying for new benefits and services, challenging decisions they felt were unfair. So we were seeing, crucially, this kind of increase in legal empowerment. Another thing to mention is that some participants also began to develop their own initiatives in their local communities, so either rights, and that's something that's been picked up on in the most recent Performing Inclusion project, which looks at training people to continue to do this work. So that's just a really brief summary, but it does seem apparent from our research into Visibility's work that this particular combination of dance and human rights that they're working does lead to legal empowerment as well as the other that I've mentioned.
Nice. I wouldn't have thought that, yes, the dance and movement does make you feel free and much more confident once you've been up on that stage, once you've performed it, once you felt like you are part of a community. It does free you, but I never thought of it from a legal empowerment point of view, the fact that they could challenge the status quo and sort of believe in themselves that much more. I mean, that's incredible, the effect that it has. I'd like to now pose a question to Dr. Vipavinee, and that is how do audiences respond to what Visibility is doing?
All right, thanks very much, Shanuki. First of all, I have to say none of this audience research would have been possible without the 17 Sri Lankan researchers who are out there with us, talking to audiences, collecting data, sweating in the sun. So they were truly amazing. And we talked to 150 audience members. And what was amazing was that in Kokadi Chole, over 60% said it was their first time seeing somebody dance, seeing somebody with disabilities perform in that way. And in Jaffna, over 84% said it was their first time watching people with disabilities dance in that way. So in terms of offering a new context within which to relate to disability, this was really effective to offer to audiences. And I'd like to just mention a few moments that audiences said were truly memorable from the performances that they watched. The first moment was the moment where you have the collective shouting of Mudiatu, Mudium between the two groups. Okay, and then the second moment was a sequence where a dancer with disabilities uses a modified trishaw as their movement aid, dances forward, and all the other dancers moves with them. And the third moment I'd like to bring up is when a woman with the brittle bone condition, she performed on the mat, but she was actually the one leading the performance. And these are just three of the many moments that the audience said really left an impression on them. And maybe Mahesh and Helena and Gerda could comment on those moments, how they were developed in a while. I'd also like to talk about some of the responses that the audience spoke about when they were directly interviewed.
I think we have a little bit of
Really
difficulty there.
appreciated.
Sorry, Vipavinee, there seems to be a lag, and the visual is frozen, as well as we can't hear you. Can you hear me? Well, I can't tell if you can. So perhaps until she's able to come back, maybe she needs to refresh because of the technical issues, the connectivity. I'd like to pose a question again to actually any one of our panelists. Perhaps, Hetty, you could give our audiences a clue as to how have you measured the empowerment of Visibilities participants?
Sure, yes. So, I mean, empowerment is a kind of slippery notion, and can mean different things in different contexts. And we were quite kind of specific in a way in the first stage of the project, that we were really looking at this idea of legal empowerment. And so therefore our way of ascertaining how legal empowerment had developed in the participants was primarily through interviews and through this quite long-term relationship established. So we continued to go at the very beginning of the project, them again, and then again 6 months later before the second round of workshops, during the second round of workshops, at the end of that round, and then 6 months after that, so a year.
Hetty, I think are you on a mic by any chance? Are you using a mic?
No.
I feel like you seem to be hitting a mic somewhere.
Oh.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm just speaking to my computer.
Okay, you're much clearer now.
Okay.
Maybe a little closer to the computer.
Sorry. So through this very long-term, year-long relationship and repeated interviews with the participants, we built a picture of how it is that both their rights knowledge and their confidence, self-esteem had developed through involvement within the project, and what kind of tangible steps they've taken to apply for benefits, services, and so on. And so that really demonstrated this kind of combination of rights and self-esteem and confidence. Okay, thank you. And Vipavinee is back. See her back. I'm sorry we lost you a little bit there. Perhaps we can pick up where we left off. Dr. Vipavinee, are you here? Oh dear, we've dropped her again. Well, these are things that we have to expect when you're online. We have some technical glitches, but maybe I can pose the next question to actually any one of the panelists. Perhaps Helena might be able to. Oh, she's back. She's back.
Yeah, back. Right, just a few more things I think would be really interesting in terms of the audience responses. So, as I said, there were 6 themes that came out. If we could go slide number 8, please. Yeah, slide number 8. So that's the one with responses. Yeah, so there were 6 themes, and here are 3 of them. So transitions, around awareness, and around purpose. And so some audiences noted that they appreciated the transition from inside the house to outside the house, from feeling that people with disabilities had no freedom to having freedom, to them from feeling unsupported to feeling supported, to not being part of society to becoming part of society. And audiences also felt they had an increased awareness around issues that people with disabilities faced, and they believe now that people with disabilities can participate in all activities, that they can come forward without shame or shyness, that they have powers, they have talents and skills as well. And finally, in terms of purpose of the performance, of the programs, so programs like this are vital to equality and inclusion, and they hope to see more of programs like Visibilities, because it encourages independence in the work and life of people with disabilities. And it's also about encouraging the community to support and take care of everyone in their community. So in terms of audience getting Visibilities' message, it's definitely coming across affectively, emotionally, and in the way that people are talking as well. And you can also see that really important element of self-reflection in people who experience these performances for themselves. And that's what will make change, this self-reflection, asking questions. That's all
and it
for me.
really started instigate social change in behaviors, in sensitization with families, when they see what their family members can do as opposed to what they believed they can't do. So that's wonderful. I have a question for Professor Lars now. My final question before we go into some of our audience questions. What are some of the larger challenges with doing this type of research?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of challenges. One is methodology, which Hetty was talking about, which is that it is very hard sometimes to measure things like empowerment and to show causation. And it's also difficult sometimes when you bring people from different disciplines together. So Hetty and Vip come from the dance world, I come from the law world, Mahesh and Gerda come from the arts world, and so we come with very different perspectives. And sometimes it's hard to agree and put us all together. So that's one challenge. And another big challenge, and this is true of any project, is around sustainability. How do you sustain something? And I think what's great about the Visibility Project is it existed before we got involved with it, and it'll go on to exist after we drop out, the researchers drop out. So again, this was a pre-existing project that we got involved in to kind of help with the monitoring and evaluation from a research perspective, but it's been going on. And as Hetty was talking about, even when Visibility wasn't working with some of the participants, they were doing stuff in their own communities. And now particularly with the new phase of the British Council funded project, the training of the trainers, that is helping to make the project more sustainable, more long-term. We've also come up with practitioner toolkits and other things to kind of help expand the reach of what Visibility is doing here, the combining of rights with dance. But again, I think sometimes I had a conversation with a Sri Lankan human rights professor and disability rights advocate, who basically was also like, look, sometimes we spend so much time worrying about sustainability, let's remember that we've actually helped a number of people in terms of improving their ordinary lives, and that's a good thing, and we should feel good about that. And so I think that is a reminder. The final thing to say is one about impact, right? So donors, funders, they always want to know about impact, and impact is really hard to show, particularly in smaller projects. You have to really kind of work with communities and individuals over the long term to be able to see impact. It can be very hard to show it in the short term. And sometimes it's also hard to show it when you're doing arts projects, because that ends up trying to instrumentalize the arts perhaps a little too much. And so these are some of the three of the bigger challenges that we faced on this project. So thanks.
Okay. And Vipavinee, one last thing to you was, how did you go about training Sri Lankan researchers to do the audience research?
Well, I wouldn't really call it training as such, because it became more of a research exchange, because we went into the culture, you know, and it was about them teaching us how to talk about disabilities in Sri Lanka within the cultural context. So we ended up discussing all these issues around words that are used in Tamil, in Sinhala, to talk about disabilities, which ones are politically correct, politically incorrect, which ones are acceptable, not acceptable, and so on. So it became more of a research exchange, even though we did share methods of audience audience engagement. So what kind of questions should we ask audiences about? But again, the Sri Lankan researchers knew how we needed to tweak these questions so that we could be more engaging with the audience members, and they knew how best to talk to audiences. So really, it was more about a research exchange.
Right. Okay. Just an audience question that came in a little while ago, and I'd like to ask perhaps Helena about, do you initiate this kind of thing with other Sri Lankan parties? Are you able to collaborate with other Sri Lankan maybe organizations or initiatives that might be interested in working with you?
Yes, I mean, we are always open for collaborations. I mean, at the moment, everything is slowed down because of COVID. But we are always looking for new partnerships, also long-time collaborations. We are also open for experiments with different types of disabilities, including mental disabilities. So if there's anyone out in the audience and wishes to engage with us, please write to us, or please write to the British Council, and we can have a discussion later on.
I think one of the questions I'd also ask, can you offer or extend your services to people with disabilities who are undergoing inpatient rehabilitation in a hospital setting? Is that possible?
I am aware that Mahesh is in touch with a rehabilitation hospital close to Vattala, but I am not aware of what the current conditions are, because due to COVID, everything has changed.
Yes.
So we may need to wait until we are very clear with the governmental rules. But if there's a chance, I mean, we are happy to open up a discussion and see how we proceed.
And perhaps Mahesh could tell us, somebody had asked, is it possible to work with, say, for instance, children with autism, children with ADHD? Is this sort of work important to make some changes in their lives?
Yeah, I think it's really necessary. I have worked with the children with autism, and but the problem, we cannot work with children with Down syndrome and autism together, because there are two different ways that you should approach them. So if we can separate them into two different workshops, it is possible, because we have knowledge to deal with autism, the children with autism and children with Down syndrome separately, and with other mental disabilities also. So I'm happy if somebody need our service. I'm happy to come and do something with our team in Sri Lanka.
And I suppose if you do need to reach out to any of these panelists to collaborate with them, to ask them more questions, to work with them to look at any possibilities of actually, learning from what they're doing and maybe passing it on to your own communities, your own schools. Please do contact the British Council, and I believe they'll put you in touch, just like Dr. Helena said. Thank you so much to all the panelists. We're a little over time, but we've managed to cover a lot. And it was certainly a very enlightening discussion for me. I hope that those of you who are watching this have learned as much and have looked at these new ways of actually encouraging inclusion in our societies. I know we don't have perhaps the best of facilities. Maybe the state can be a little more supportive of the issue, but as society, I think through arts, through understanding, through empathy, through this language of movement, there's so much that we can do by ourselves to really make the world a better place for each other. So that's something I think we can pick out of this session. And I thank you, panelists and presenters, for being here with us today. It was really wonderful to see what kind of work you've been doing. Thank you so much to the British Council for making this panel discussion possible, and more power to everyone. This is me signing out.
Thank you.
Bye.